At 30,000 feet above the Earth, silence can be more terrifying than any explosion. The cockpit of the military transport aircraft was never meant to be quiet. It was supposed to hum, to speak in warning tones, to breathe alongside its pilots. But that night, somewhere above the jagged spine of the Rockies, the silence arrived suddenly, like a weapon. Captain Marcus Hale never saw it coming. One moment, his gloved hands were steady on the controls, eyes scanning the instruments with the calm confidence of a man who had logged over 4,000 flight hours for the Army. The next moment, the edges of his vision narrowed, the cockpit lights blurred, and a crushing weight pressed against his chest. Pressure, he tried to say. The word never made it out. First Officer Daniel Ruiz slumped forward seconds later, his headset sliding off as the aircraft continued forward on pure momentum, flying blind at 500 miles per hour. Inside the cockpit, both Army pilots were unconscious. And sitting just behind them, strapped into a jump seat she was never supposed to use, was 12-year-old Emily Hale. Emily had grown up around Army airfields. The smell of jet fuel was familiar. The sound of rotor blades and engines was the soundtrack of her childhood. Her father, Captain Hale, had promised her this would be a simple orientation flight, nothing dangerous. Just a chance to see what he did, to feel proud of the uniform. Now, she was staring at two motionless soldiers. At first, she thought they were joking. "Dad," she said, leaning forward. "Dad, stop messing around." No response. The aircraft began to drift slightly off heading. A warning light flickered on. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She had been raised by Army discipline. Panic was not allowed. Fear was acknowledged, but never obeyed. She unstrapped herself and moved forward, hands shaking as she touched her father's shoulder. He didn't move. That's when she noticed the oxygen warning flashing on the panel. Low cabin pressure. Her breathing became shallow as realization hit her harder than any turbulence ever could. They were losing altitude control. And no one else was awake to stop it. Far below, thousands of civilians slept peacefully, unaware that a fully loaded Army aircraft was now a silent missile in the sky. Emily had seconds to make a decision. She could scream. She could freeze. Or she could remember every single thing she'd absorbed growing up on military bases. Every story, every briefing she'd overheard, every moment she'd sat quietly in the back of a simulator room while soldiers trained. Her father used to say, "In the Army, you don't wait for permission to do the right thing. You act." Emily reached for the headset. Her small fingers wrapped around the controls. And at 30,000 feet above the Earth, a 12-year-old Army brat became the only conscious pilot on board. She didn't know it yet, but what she was about to do would save every soul on that aircraft. And rewrite what courage looks like. Emily Hale was not an ordinary child. She had learned to walk on concrete runways and learned to sleep through the roar of engines. Army bases were her hometowns, though none ever lasted long enough to feel permanent. New orders always came. New locations. New goodbyes. Her mother used to joke that Emily could read rank insignia before she could read books. Her father never joked. Captain Marcus Hale believed in preparation. He believed that soldiers didn't rise to the occasion, they fell back on their training. And even though Emily was never meant to be a soldier, she had absorbed that mindset through sheer proximity. She'd watched pre-flight inspections from a distance. She'd listened quietly as pilots debriefed missions at the kitchen table. She knew the names of instruments she was never supposed to touch. Altitude, heading, airspeed. So when she slipped the headset over her ears and heard only static at first, something inside her snapped into focus. She tapped the radio. "Hello." Her voice cracked. This is Emily. "I need help." No response. The aircraft dipped slightly. Emily forced herself to breathe slowly, just like her father taught her when she was scared of heights. She looked at the pilots again. Still unconscious. The oxygen masks, still unused. She pulled one down and strapped it to her face first, then wrestled another onto her father. It took all her strength. Then she remembered something crucial. Emergency descent procedures. She didn't know them perfectly, but she knew enough to know the plane needed to go lower. Fast. Her hand hovered over the controls. "I can do this," she whispered, not to anyone else, but to herself. Outside the cockpit window, the night sky stretched endlessly. Inside, a child carried the weight of an Army aircraft and everyone inside it. Suddenly, a voice crackled through the headset. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Denver Air Traffic Control. You're drifting off assigned heading. Identify." Emily nearly cried. She pressed the transmit button with trembling fingers. This is an Army aircraft," she said. "The pilots are unconscious. I'm 12. Please help me. Silence followed. Then the voice returned, this time slower, steadier. Okay, Emily, you did the right thing. We've got you. On the ground, military and civilian controllers exchanged stunned looks. A child, in control of an army aircraft. And above them all, time was running out. Once the situation was clear, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The Army does not hesitate. Within minutes, command centers were alerted. Air Force liaison officers joined the call. Emergency response teams scrambled. A nearby Air National Guard base diverted assets. Emily didn't know any of that. All she knew was the calm voice guiding her through the chaos. Emily, listen carefully. You're doing great. I need you to gently reduce altitude. She adjusted the controls slowly, just as she'd seen done hundreds of times before. The aircraft responded. Her stomach lifted as the nose dipped. Good, the controller said. Perfect. Now maintain heading. Sweat ran down Emily's back. Her arms ached. The aircraft felt enormous, like trying to steer a mountain. Behind her, her father groaned softly. Dad, she called. No response, but the sound alone gave her hope. Oxygen levels were improving. Below them, a military base prepared its runway. Fire crews lined up. Medics waited. Commanders watched the radar screen, unwilling to look away. This wasn't just a flight emergency. It was an army family fighting together. Emily followed every instruction with absolute focus. There was no room for fear now. Fear wasted energy. As the aircraft descended through 15,000 feet, color returned to the pilots' faces. Captain Hale stirred. Emily, he whispered. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept flying. I've got it, Dad, she said. Just like you taught me. He tried to move, but she stopped him. Stay still. Help is coming. For the first time in his career, Captain Hale realized something terrifying and beautiful at once. His daughter had become the soldier. The runway lights appeared like a path carved out of darkness. Emily's hands were numb now, but she didn't let go. Every instruction came slow and deliberate. Every movement mattered. You're lined up perfectly, the controller said. Just keep her steady. Wind buffeted the aircraft. Warning lights flashed, but nothing Emily hadn't already faced. Below, hundreds of army personnel stood watching the sky. They knew history was unfolding above them. As the wheels lowered, Captain Hale fully regained consciousness. He looked at the controls. At Emily. And then he did something no army officer ever forgets. He trusted his daughter. The aircraft descended. The ground rushed up. And then, impact. The wheels screamed against the runway. Emily held the controls straight. The aircraft slowed. Finally, stillness. For a moment, no one spoke. Then cheers erupted over the radio. Emily collapsed back into the seat, shaking, crying, laughing all at once. She had done it. Emily Hale didn't ask to be a hero. She didn't wear a uniform. She didn't take an oath. But that night, she lived by every value the Army stands for. Duty, discipline, selfless service. Weeks later, in a quiet ceremony on base, Emily stood between her parents as senior officers spoke. They didn't call her a miracle. They called her trained. By life, by example, by the people who raised her. Captain Hale couldn't finish his speech. His voice broke. She saved my life, he said. She saved all of us. Emily just smiled shyly. Because heroes don't always look like soldiers. Sometimes. They're 12 years old. And when everything goes silent at 30,000 feet, they take the controls.